like, what did you talk about? Because I heard that you talked about like, okay, should we be able to reference any version of a claim, right? That was a topic.
It's a bit more complex than that. There was a lot of what I think was very good discussion about layers. What's layer 1, what's layer 2? And there's a kind of agreement that a lot of what is the mutability is about saying, well, there's this version and this version and this version, and actually this is the latest version. And there is probably a voting aspect. There are a consensus aspect or a curation algorithm aspect. I don't know if it's a consensus yet. I'd like them to chime in, but this is, I think this has been clarified in discussion. And for me, that clarifies what layer 2 is, or what Stephen meant by layer 2, and I'm fine, I'm aligned with that. The notion, and then the notion of the identity that remains content across versions becomes a layer 2 concern. What we have in layer 1 is this claims to replace that, and do people and recording that some people agree or disagree, or curation operations as immutable events. Whereas the question of, but that means, and that's something we've been debating a lot as a consequence, is how much do we want to encourage people to only do operations on the latest version? And the point I made is either way, we have to extend, for example, if a new rebuttal is added to an argument and somebody's linked to an old version, we have to kind of backport the argument to the old version because people are still linking to it. Or we allow people to make arguments to the old version and forward port it to the new version. And in a way, it's equivalent, and I think both are needed. But the idea is, do we want to allow people to still mess with the old version, or should they just point to it and please update as app? I don't have a big argument on that, but what is clear is either way, we'll have to make sure that arguments made against our version, we can check if they still make sense for earlier or later versions. That, I think, is constant.
Yeah, the problem is with linking to an old version, and then if there's a new one, and you say you expect people to update, most people probably won't. So you have a lot of bit rot in there, I guess.
That's absolutely true. The thing is to make sure that the display layer still shows, oh, there's been this counter arguments to a newer version, even if you still have the old version. So at the library version, there should be these, taking this into account. But pointing to the old version, I think we all agree is needed because, no, I agree, people won't update, but on the other hand, they'll point to the old version. And we don't want to have them point to the mutable latest state because you don't know when that creates nonsense. We want people to control, yeah, those changes, it's still what I meant, especially in the case of a split, of a concept split.
Yeah, there are trade-offs on both sides, and I'm not sure which one is the right approach. Like always pointing to the latest version, or always pointing to specific versions, and then you have the update problem.
Yeah, I prefer to.
I don't think there's a right solution to that. I think it's a use case, right? There are times you want to reference what's going on in the debate and keep up with it, and there are times you want to show a snapshot or show how it was at a specific moment.
And do the references of an argument belong to the argument itself, the claim itself? Like, is that also version, or are the links independent?
So are the links to the identity or to the snapshot? And I've been arguing there's no identity because there's always splits and merge.
if you ever want to point to the latest version of something, you need to define that something, and that something will fully depend on the use case. And I think we all have some idea of what that is. And I have been pushing to call that a canonical claim versus a accepted immutable claim. That's the whole distinction I want to outline. These are two separate entities in the system, in my opinion, and they have different identities. The accepted immutable claim is a pretty trivial identity, probably just a static hash code that can be generated from its entire content. And then canonical claim, we need to start delving into user stories, in my opinion. The key point I really just wanted to highlight with this whole user stories thing is these are two entirely different entities, and they will be modeled differently. They're related, but I don't think they're the same.
It started with the immutable claim.
Sorry? Yeah, I missed the first 10 minutes. Sorry, I was
No. I was just recapping to Felix, so you didn't miss much.
Okay.
And actually, we were chatting until you came for a while, and then Felix asked me to recap, so I tried to. And hopefully, Tim, I didn't make too much of a hash of the recap, because I tried to say, okay, I think we agreed on this. I'm not sure we agreed on that, but this has been a.
Yeah, there are some fine, detailed, critical conclusions we came up with that you didn't cover, and I don't know if I can unfortunately remember them exactly, just off the top of my head. But we did have some interesting realizations.
One of the interesting realizations I want to resolve today was, Timothy, you argued that the current terminology introduced here between accepted immutable claim and contributed immutable claim pretty much assumes that there is such a thing as a stage where a claim needs to be accepted. Like, because we said once accepted, the claim can be used as part of other structures. And then you said, but
what is the difference between acceptable and accepted? That's a state transition.
Well, that's in the definition of accepted right now, right? So an accepted immutable claim is indeed an acceptable one that got accepted
By some process.
Yes.
Right.
But you said, what if you want to build a system that doesn't have that? I think it's still fine, because we can use this terminology to say, well, all contributed immutable claims instantly become accepted immutable claims. You can't say that. And I would argue I want a system where there is a process, but you can equally use this language to say, well, so even that disagreement that we might have, where you said, like, well, this language presumes that that process is in place, still allows you to talk about an alternate process where it isn't in place. So in that sense, I think this terminology is useful.
There is something that bothers me more in the contributed immutable claim, where you're saying, oh, actually it's mutable, and Tim said, oh, then we shouldn't call it immutable.
Agreed.
I'm questioning, do we need mutable claims? I understand that it's preliminary, it's still being edited, but I'd still have the same chain of mutability mechanism that happens later.
I think it's a similar summary as what I just said. You can argue that all contributed claims instantly become immutable claims.
Yeah.
Right. We also agree in preserving all history. So there's different definitions of immutable.
True. And
there's an immutable, which is, we definitely want everything accessible there, right? And then there's just how are you going to define or envision version? And maybe the solution is that canonical claims are mutable in some way, but these different contributed or acceptable claims are immutable. Maybe the solution here is that the canonical claim is mutable in the sense that it's current, what it considers the current version in whatever way can be replaced. You can keep changing what it considers as the current version, but each one of those are immutable, right? That's a solution to the problem.
Right. So let's rename it to contributed mutable claim.
Just contributed claim. I'm fine with either. Just
I'm thinking.
I like contributed claim because it's shorter.
Okay.
I mean, in the end, unless it at some point will overlap with other contributed claims, then we can refine. That the reason it was called originally contributed immutable claim is because it intends to be an immutable claim. Suppose later there's other types of claims you want to contribute, like canonical claims. Like a contributed canonical claim might be something different than a contributed immutable claim. That's why I made the distinction. But let's just go with contributed claim for now.
Sure. With the caveat that some systems, like if I don't want any mutable claim, that means I won't have contributed claim, which is not true. I'll just have contributed immutable claims, which is a subcase. It's in a system where contributed claims are always immutable. Do I need a new name, or do we say contributed claims can be mutable or immutable? Depending on the system
I would just
implementation.
express that use case as saying in this system there are no contributed claims. Each claim that is contributed automatically becomes an accepted immutable claim. That's how I would use that.
Then let's call them mutable.
Like this?
Yeah.
How are we on the definition? I just added the point that Timothy makes, which is valid. The mutability of this claim does not preclude maintaining a history of its edits, which is a good thing, a good comment to add. Like you can still have a full history of all the edits done to this mutable claim, right?
Okay. I'm perfectly happy with that form.
You have a typo in the earth is flat.
It's on purpose. It's not a typo.
Okay.
The earth is flat.
Okay.
Even can be added to the earth is flat, after which it can be accepted.
Okay.
I don't do typos. No, I do. I just correct them. I'm so used to Stack Overflow that like everywhere I keep editing my messages after I wrote them.
Same.
It's good. It's like proofreading. It's a good habit. More people should do it. I will rename this one then, just to make it aligned. Timothy, no objections?
Yeah, you can check my name.
Oops, I'm on mute. Yeah, you know, I'm not sure if I want this to be mutable is the thing. Yeah, I know that's what you just did, but it does not preclude maintaining a history of its edits. Well, all right, fine.
Once we're going to use these definitions, we'll probably find holes or whatever the definitions anyway.
Well, but again,
what do you mean by you don't want this to be mutable? You don't want the definition to be named mutable? You don't want this concept to be mutable? Like, what do you mean exactly?
We're playing around again with the definition of mutable and immutable. I guess I don't want anything to be immutable if you're defining mutable as still accepting changes, still preserving the full history, right? I don't have trouble with changing anything if you are allowed to preserve the full history.
Okay, I think the distinction here, and maybe it's in some systems, suppose there's a system outside our ken that we import data from. I know importing data is not a concern, but it's about having conversations about systems or hypothetical systems we want to decide not to do, where we agreed that at some point we have to fix things so we can keep references to them, and those are immutable even if there's edit by link. But some of them, they're like so obviously preliminary that in some implementations we might decide to make them mutable and even not keep the history. And the question is, does our system allow that or not? Which is a real question, but at least we now have a name for that. Do we allow mutable things, or are all contributed claims automatically immutable, in which case they fall in the other category, which is acceptable immutable claim, or immutable claim. There's a category before acceptable, right?
And no, we just have like an overarching immutable claim name.
Yeah.
So what Marc-Antoine says is true, and on top of that, remember that the
okay, like if you want to just say terminology in terms of, you know, there's the concept of something that can be changed before it becomes immutable, and then there's a point where it becomes
immutable and referenceable.
And
yeah, but I would say
referenceable is
that,
the key word here indeed. Maybe referenceable actually is a good name.
But here's the thing. Wait, say that again. Go ahead.
That's a key thing, is the referenceable thing. As long as the claim hasn't been accepted, it can be either removed. There's no shared immutable representation. Once it's accepted, it becomes referenceable. That's a key distinction here.
Yeah, but there's a okay. Here are the concepts that are overlapping. There's, you know, when do you start preserving history? You know, and I think, to me, preserving history is the beginning of immutability, because that's the moment where you see everything and you can.
The immutability of what?
Well,
you can.
No, Stephen, I understand what Tim is saying.
Okay.
He's saying he's not sure about being willing to call this mutable or immutable when we say we preserve history, because preserving history is a kind of immutability. It's what does mutable
Yeah, but of
mean?
something different than a claim that we're trying to define here. That's why I said immutability of what? Sure, nothing is mutable if you scrape all history, but what are we talking about here? All and any data entered into the system. What we're trying to define is entities, concepts that are used as part of user stories. Conceptually, are these mutable? We're not talking about data broadly speaking.
No, and I agree with you there. And that way, the question also is, does it have an identity? Sorry.
Exactly. And the thing we're talking about here is this thing you can reference and you know will always be the same. If you reference it, you know that representation that was once there in the system can always be retrieved, regardless of whether or not that there might be a history.
If you history, can't you always retrieve it?
Yeah, but how, and how do you know that's the correct history, etc.? Those are
yeah,
all
but then you're
things
defining other things. Then you're see, that's why there's so many overlapping things here, right? Here are the things that are going in is, can you see the history, right? Does, when you make a change to it, does it edit in place, or does it create?
It doesn't. That's a key thing here.
Wait, I'm getting to several things. Then there's acceptability. Is it somehow accepted into some other status? And then there's, is it acceptable, which is a quality measure. And what you have here is an assumption that you contribute something, and before it becomes this immutable thing, it also seems to have the qualities. So embedded in the definitions is that somehow when it becomes immutable now, it is at the quality level that we've stated, which is an orthogonal concept.
Maybe we can compare it to maybe we can compare it to pull requests on GitHub, because there you have a branch, you can have several commits, you can have a little history inside the pull request, and once you merge, you squash and have the finished commit which you can refer to, and the other commits of the history are on purpose deleted or kept on purpose or whatever. Does that help?
I mean, that's an option, right? That is an option. But what I'm saying here is that's not what's built into these definitions here. There's decisions built into the definition, right? And
where I hear you, Tim, is that a lot of these definitions are mixing many concerns. And you know, the question of acceptable, the questions of immutability, the question of history, the question of the curation process before it's acceptable, the curation process after it's acceptable. So these are all kind of mixed concerns, and we're doing these supposedly nouns, which are a combination of concerns. And maybe it would be a good idea to define each of the adjectives, so to speak. What do we mean by accepted, not accepted? What do you mean by mutable, immutable? What do we mean by each of those adjectives separately? And then we could speak about, here's a mutable, contributed, blah, blah, blah. And then we would know what it means from each of the components. But maybe it would be useful to define the components separately rather than all wrapped up in these complex noun bundles. That I'm not opposed to.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part is that, like I said before, I don't think mutable, immutable is well defined, and I think it's kind of changing definition as we go from one place to another.
But do you really focus too much on that word? Because again, it's not, remember the use case. I don't know how to explain this, but the key thing, that's why I liked it when Martin points at referenceability. That's the key thing. You want to be able to reference it at a certain point in time, and you want to, whenever you reference to it, know exactly what was being referenced. That is the use case. That is what this thing is trying to say, this potato claim is trying to be.
But this is Stephen, I think it would be a good idea to say, okay, what do we mean by referenceable? And then we can say the contributed claim is not referenceable, and then we have a pointer to the referenceable adjective. It is may or may not be immutable, for example. Then we'd have a reference to the immutable adjective.
It's the discussion we haven't been having enough, which is totally unrelated to the immutability. That's what I'm saying. They're focusing too much on the immutability aspect. The point is, once accepted, it can be used as part of other structures.
Yeah.
Do you want to allow people to use any garbage like spam as definitions in the system? Do you want to allow people to add any claim as arguments in the system, etc., etc.? Like, or is there some cutoff point where something becomes accepted and worthy of maintaining a history conceptually, like in the sense that Felix said, in a pull request history, that's a meaningful semantic commit so it is a nice comparison in that sense. At what point becomes an edit semantically meaningful to maintain a history in a different sense than maintaining, oh, I entered A, oh, I entered B. Do you want to maintain a history of each individual keystroke? No, it's meaningless. So it's like trying to find the right level at which you keep history we're trying to define here.
It's a complex question.
But then you agree. I understood that you agreed with me that somebody who submits something should be able to refer to and show the thing they submitted. Do you agree with that or not?
Yes. By submitted, you mean,
okay,
for example,
so the moment it's been contributed, to me, it's referenceable. It can be referenced. Yes. Right? So we're not even talking about whether something can be referenced. It's an attribute that's given to anything.
Yeah, but okay, let's write that up just to make clear why you can perfectly say, as a web author, I want to link to a contributed mutable claim to requests so that I can request feedback of others to see whether or not it is an acceptable immutable claim. I mean, that's a perfectly valid use case, and that would require referenceability to a contributed immutable claim, but that's a different referenceability than to an accepted immutable claim. This is a different
but you've also just made up a use case right there. What if as a contributor of any kind, not just a web author, I want to show that I contributed something. I want to see how it evolved over time. It could be that I'm accusing the platform of censoring me. And so I want to show what I put in and how they messed it up and changed it to something I didn't like.
Sure,
right?
And I'm not against it, but I'm pointing out all of these are different use cases than the referenceability of an accepted immutable claim. You're saying any contribution, like any entity, any data I want to make referenceable. That's a technological use case.
It's not a technological use case. I gave you a specific human reason for wanting to see exactly what you contributed as you contributed.
But you abstracted it because you said somebody submitted something.
But let's have Tim's.
I don't understand.
Let's have Tim's use case. I agree with you, Stephen, that there's a jump between the claim as Stephen put it, which I think is a perfectly reasonable use case, and its technological abstraction, which is separate, fair enough. But let's have Tim's original use case added to that.
Which is
right. The contributed claim,
it's separate. It's not this one. It's a separate one. Yeah.
The contributed claim isn't even in your use case, right? It's a definition that evolved through other conversations, right?
As a contributor. What's the use case?
I would like to reference a contributed claim.
Or my unaccepted contribution.
I want to reference, it could be accepted too. I want to reference my contributed claim as it was submitted, as it was contributed, or whatever term you want to use for that.
I want to reference a point in history of my contributed immutable claim. Or I want to, I mean, yeah. So
okay. I mean, that's broader, sure, but that includes.
I want to reference my contributed immutable claim at a certain point in time, or rather.
Or as it originally was.
At 2 points, at 2 separate points in time.
Basically, yeah, it's 2 separate points in time.
3.
That's the broadest version of this use case. And the so that, there's a lot of so that, right? Each one, I guess, is a different use case, but the implementation, there's a lot of so that. One is so that I can prove I was treated unfairly, so that I can show, so that I can learn the standards of the platform and improve future contributions, so that I can accuse.
But no, you want to reference, like, do you want to view it or do you want to reference? Do you want, because one was viewing it, I think. Like, do you want to link to it and share it with other people, or do you want to view it so you can see the mistakes made in the past?
I want to view. I would say I want to reference, that is, create a reference a view of the evolution of 2 points in the evolution of an immutable claim. To create a reference to a view of 2 stages in the evolution of a mutable claim, so that
I see. I want to see the full history of all edits of my contributed immutable claim, so that
there's a lot of so that, right?
But
I don't know which one you want to choose.
So that I can contest. I can contest a modification. So that I can contest a modification, for example.
Yeah,
that's one. But you're right, Timothy. So that I can learn the standards is a beautiful other so that. They're both valid. They're both important.
Or gather initial feedback. It's also one I like.
How do you get a feedback through edits, like implicitly because somebody edited it?
Yeah. No, like you create something as a draft maybe and let someone review.
I mean, first of all, this also implies that edits are being made by anyone out there. So there's probably also a discussion to be had who can edit contributed mutable claims, for example. But
well, in the crowdsourced platform could be many different contributions and edits.
But these are different stories.
I think the key one that Timothy wants, so that I can always, I think the key one here is you don't want data to be lost, right? You want transparency, you want full so I would go with that.
Transparency is a good word.
So that there is full transparency
of what
curation actions.
Yeah, that's good. Tim?
I would go with that one as the main one. We can always add more, but I think that's a primary use case here.
Right, I agree with that. What the problem that I'm trying to present is that use case to me doesn't have to end at when something is no longer a contributed mutable claim. If it
Yes, but I
transitions
think it's
to
a different
another
use
state.
case after. I agree there, but I think it's going to be a different use case after. But let's try to write that one up. So you want to say,
Stephen, I think that's the whole contestation. I don't think we need a special mechanism for before or after accepted. I think it's the same bloody thing, before and after.
Let's see what the implications are.
Yeah, sure. I agree. It's an empirical claim that I'm
first
making.
of all, you can't edit an accepted immutable claim. So you can't see a history of edits of an accepted immutable claim
But
by
you can
definition. So what do you
but
want to
you can-
see?
Well, you can see the evolution of the successive preferred forms.
So you implying that there's a separate use case that
Right,
you
right.
want to propose some evolution, and those use cases are going to have different impacts than.
And I'm saying it's the
Potentially.
same bloody thing.
Okay.
I mean, I understand it's too,
Okay.
it's
So what you're arguing then is that all contributed mutable claims should instantly become accepted immutable claims,
yes,
right? So we can
Yes.
express it, and we can now express a disagreement.
yes.
But can
No,
we
no,
then move
and I agree,
forward
that's a useful-
and talk about use cases of accepted immutable claims where you want to talk about the evolution? Because that's the key thing that's undefined here that you apparently need, where we disagree on whether or not there's a need for a contributed mutable claim. I mean, if you guys are arguing we don't need contributed mutable claims, all of them are instantly accepted, that's fine. We now have
That's-
language for that.
I am arguing that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm arguing that on the level of history, maintaining history and evolution of data or of the object, right? But that's not necessarily meaning I'm throwing out the possibility of there being a change in state somehow in terms of, you know, we may need to put a gateway that says stuff doesn't show up until it's been approved by some people as garbage, and we need to keep out the garbage. But I would still want to be able to reference that and say, look, they accuse me of contributing garbage.
Yeah, so
right?
that would be this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But by the way, and this is where Tim's point about, see, the question of accepted, right? For me, the contributed claim is immediately immutable. Does it mean it's immediately accepted? It's immediately immutable, it's immediately referenceable. It doesn't mean it's immediately, well, it's acceptable. Yeah, it's not accepted. That's fine. Accepted is still a separate phenomenon. Okay, so claims are either acceptable or accepted. That's cool. It's still orthogonal. But I said, for me, it's orthogonal. When you say it's automatically an acceptable immutable claim, it's
No, accepted. I think what you're arguing is that there's no such notion as contributed mutable claim. If you add a claim to a system you envision, it instantly becomes an accepted immutable claim that can be used.
No, acceptable, but referenceable.
That would mean that there's no process, right?
For me, it's referenceable even if has not
But
been
referenceable for which use case? Can it instantly be used as part of arguments and definitions, etc.?
Maybe not.
Well, if it's maybe not, you're more leaning towards this concept being useful.
No,
maybe
I'm saying
yes, then you're more leaning towards having this.
No, I'm saying contributed mutable claim instantly becomes acceptable as opposed to accepted immutable claim. And that means I'm saying it's still not useful, but
So
maybe that's the correct name actually.
here's the problem, right? Acceptable. We've defined criteria, right? We've defined a minimum level of criteria. And what's interesting about that, that's one of the overlapping concerns I was talking about, is if the function of being accepted is that only then can it be used as a supporting argument or something, then you are imposing that structure into the process where it may be, you know, like I said, I think there may be some sort of moderation required to keep out junk or something. But the moment that it's decided not junk, could be before it matches all the acceptable criteria. Maybe, I don't know. It could just be. This
But that's
is
the distinction
spam.
between
Okay,
accepted and contributed. I really don't see the problem here.
Sorry, I still do. Okay. I contribute a claim. It might be junk, it might be unacceptable, it might be
Yeah.
acceptable and not yet gone through the process of being accepted.
Exactly.
It can be anything, but it's contributed. For me, it should be at once referenceable.
Yeah, but
So
that's here. The mutability of this claim does not preclude maintaining a history of edits which are referenceable.
yeah,
already.
but yeah, exactly. So this has.
Jesus, how do you write this?
Reference, and then it's not mutable. It's not mutable in a sense. It's not destructive edits.
Okay, I'll remove it. That's why I suggest let's just call it contributed claim.
Yeah, but I mean, it seemed like it was mutable before. Now
But
it is. Now we're changing
it's
it.
conceptually mutable. You keep like confounding.
Yeah, but that's what. Yes.
Yeah, but then to me, according to your definition of conceptually mutable, I would say an accepted claim is also conceptually mutable because you could propose replacements, right?
But,
and so the concept to me is consistent throughout. I don't see a change in that concept.
You just, Timothy, you just used language, first of all, that's not on here. You're saying that there will be a use case, something like proposed changes for an accepted immutable claim. The thing is, those will become two accepted immutable claims where one is a suggested replacement of the other. There will still be two accepted immutable claims that are immutable conceptually.
Yes.
Yeah, but then you're literally getting down into technology implementation, because you're saying that we have to implement the history of a contributed claim differently from how we implement the history of an accepted immutable claim.
Not
That's what you're
necessarily,
saying.
you don't know. I'm saying they're different use cases. That might be the same, it might not be the same.
I'm saying they're not different use cases. I'm saying they're the same use case at any stage. Yeah.
I'm saying it's the exact same use case.
So again, if you're saying the same use case, what you're saying is that all contributed claims should instantly become accepted immutable claims. That's fine.
No, he means like use case in the sense of keeping history and being able to reference specific versions.
Can we just
sidestep
this whole discussion and move forward to where we can actually talk about evolution of claims, which is where this whole thing lies?
Wait, but let me just point out what you were saying. I'm saying contributed claim is immediately an accepted immutable claim. And what I'm saying is the problem with the definitions here is embedded in accepted immutable claim is that it is an acceptable claim, which has standards of quality that a contributed claim doesn't necessarily have. And so by definition, a contributed claim cannot be an accepted claim because it's not an acceptable claim, right? And that's the conflict right there of definitions that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and this is why we need to unbundle. There's the whole life cycle, contributed, acceptable, accepted. That's one life cycle. And there's the whole question of how do we handle replacement, AKA addition. And that is a vaguely technological concern. And the problem is the definitions bundle those two concepts. When we say it's the same use case, we're saying the notion of evolution and of being able to reference different stages in the evolution of the claim are the same for unacceptable, well, contributed, maybe unacceptable, acceptable or accepted claims. It's the same logic of evolution, no matter where they are in the acceptability life cycle, which is probably a layer 2 concern. But the evolution mechanisms are a layer 1 concern, or possibly mixed because.
So should we then, it sounds like we should change accepted immutable claim, but that there's not much wrong with contributed in that sense.
Maybe we just call it accepted claim. And we kind of punt
claim
on whether or not it has to be acceptable. That's more, that's like a separate discussion.
Yes. Or actually, if the key thing is once accepted can be used as part of other structures, it's more like a referenceable claim or a, Yeah, I'll accept it. I'm fine
usable
with it.
claim.
Yeah,
No,
Yeah.
usable, yeah, and that may also be another question. There's being able to reference it in my text, like I've contributed this claim, so I'm making a reference to it.
no, but I mean, as
No,
part
one
of our
second.
structures.
And I'm trying to exactly pry apart those two. I'm saying, can you say that a contributed claim, which has not been vetted for acceptability, is a pro or a con to an accepted argument? And that's an empirical decision. I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think we could say no first, go through the process of getting accepted before you say it. Or you could say, well, it's tentatively a pro, and it could be, downgraded in the scoring because not yet accepted. And let's actually see if it's valid, but we still mark it as wanting to be a pro of that other thing. And that's I don't have strong opinions here. I think both are conceivable and possibly useful, but it's a different concern than is it referenceable from outside?
Yeah. The one other problem I have with the use case specifically is having to wait for something to be accepted sounds contrary to what an actual web contributor would want, which is I'm writing a thing. I want to essentially, and I want to be able to use it. I want to make a claim and support it with arguments and show that. So in other words, I want a mini map, a group of claims and arguments that I reference.
Yeah, I
in
think that
my blog.
goes into the definition of claim repository. So, and I think that's also by, like, rather than just contributing a single claim to a claim repository, I think in that case, you're having a local, we haven't defined claim repository, but I would argue a claim repository is probably a collection of claims. And I think in that case, you want to make a local, you want to do additions to a local claim repository, which you then try the full claim repository, try to add to another claim repository. That's the language I would use there.
Yeah, that's possible. Oh wait, so the first one is linked to rather than create. So the first one, linked to, works with accepted immutable claim. Yes. It's when you are creating your own that I would guess you don't want to wait for it to have to become accepted and start using stuff.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
But I want to resolve the last issue you raised, Timothy, because I get it now. So your struggle is the acceptable immutable claim here, whereas, yeah, that it's ambiguous in the, well, not ambiguous, it's overloaded, it's both immutable and accepted, right?
And it's conceptually
so
mutable.
I think,
yeah,
actually it's that it's acceptable and accepted is what needs to be separated.
Well,
because acceptable is a criteria,
but I think the criteria have always been complicated here, right? I mean, because originally I think we just called this an immutable claim, wasn't it? Or what was this even originally called? I don't remember. The original definition, remember, it's you, Timothy, that argued to tear accepted and acceptable apart. Originally, I think this was defined, which aims to be, and then there was like a list of, and that would be more correct.
Is what? Well, but what's interesting is that I'm trying to tear it even more apart to say, although that criteria that we defined as being acceptable, maybe a higher standard than we want for starting to be able to use it in other structures. In other words, I might want it to be usable even before it's the level of quality of accepted or acceptable. I'll have to look at the acceptable criteria again.
And this is what I was trying to say when I said, let's pry apart the referenceable from outside and referenceable, what
By
Tim just
argument.
called usable. I think that even a contributed claim could be usable even before we know anything about it. And
Right.
I'm agnostic about it, but I tend to think that it should be possible to use it. Though of course it will be filtered out in many views.
The problem is also that we started with immutable claim in the first place, right? And now we're using that in acceptable, immutable claim and so on.
I mean, if I were to kind of start from scratch a little bit, I would say, like, we should be working with all these different adjectives, right? We should define the different adjectives. So there should be contributed claim. That's something somebody submitted, right? It's in the system by somebody, but nothing about quality. One second.
Yeah, but it says which intends to be.
And then
The point is still what do you contribute? Because the point is there's different types of claims we're teasing apart.
Okay, but what do you contribute? I suppose we should have a minimum.
No, but the aim is to contribute an immutable claim. That's why it started. The aim is to contribute something that you can link to and that will always show up as the same thing. That's where we came from.
Except that in order to talk about this, we need different definitions that we all share that get to the different things we're debating about, right? Which is what is a claim that you can use as an argument, a usable claim. Like I would propose a definition of a usable claim, right? And then we can talk about whether what we've called an acceptable claim. If something doesn't reach the level of acceptable claim, can it be used, right? Can it be a usable claim even though it's not an acceptable claim?
Are all contributed claims usable?
Exactly. Are all contributed claims usable, right? You know, are there other meanings to accepted or other things you want to talk about for accepted?
It doesn't solve the problem between. It doesn't solve the problem between the distinction that we're heading for between canonical claim and immutable claim, because I still see where we will head towards with canonical claim that it's probably a collection of immutable claims, where one is the preferred.
There will be something like immutable claim, right? Which we get to.
Yeah, but I'm saying it doesn't solve the problem. Like, when you say usable claim or accepted claim, are you talking about a usable immutable claim or a usable, like, that? Does it mean that a canonical claim can be added as an argument, or is it actually?
We need to define what immutable is. What is an immutable claim? That's the question. What is an immutable claim?
That we have. Immutable claim is defined. That's one of the things where we used to have most.
But, you know, all this process, we've kind of been putting a bunch of adjectives together or something, like a lot of concepts all in one thing. And if we separate them, we can start asking these questions like, is an immutable claim usable, or is a non-immutable claim shared immutable representation, which people can agree or disagree on? You know, so maybe a mutable claim is right. So is any contributed claim an immutable claim?
I think so.
Then if the way it was defined, unfortunately, is that we started putting criteria in immutable claim so that it was at least a claim. So for me, it's already a bit too strong. I would say immutable, something that aims to be a claim, that may not even be a claim, and that has no criteria. It's a contributed something that claims to be a claim. Contributed
why wouldn't that be a contributed immutable claim exactly like it was originally?
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is, as we define immutable claim, we defined it as having all kinds of acceptability criteria already.
Which we seem to agree on. And that's why,
Which we agreed on, but
how do you delineate from those criteria being met or not? If you want to build a system where you want these criteria to be met, how do you talk about those criteria being met or not met?
I'm saying, I'm proposing to, okay, what I'm saying is, I'm now revisiting my agreement with immutable claim. Immutable claim, as it was defined, is already close to acceptable immutable claim. I would have something that is more fundamental than that.
The problem is immutable claim is not enforceable by a system automatically.
Right.
Right. And so it opens the question, when you contribute something, and it doesn't match all those criteria, what is it? And how does it get to the immutable? It's not an immutable claim, but we do want it to have all the characteristics of immutable, which is we want to be able to see the history and everything, but we want it to be improvable, right? But an immutable claim is immutable, so it's not improvable, except it can be improved because you want to replace it with other stuff. And so it's got criteria in there, like you said, that it looks and smells like a contributed claim. A contributed claim could be an immutable claim if it happens to match certain unenforceable criteria.
Okay, so what I propose, let me be precise. I propose immutable phrase for something we don't even know if it's a claim. We don't know anything. It's just something that's being contributed in the system. And immutable proto-claim, which is immutable phrase which has been proposed as a claim. Now, it may not have any of the acceptability criteria, but it's being proposed that this is a claim as opposed to an argument, an entity, and so on. So immutable phrase can be anything, absolutely anything. And immutable proto-claim.
Not in the system or already in the system?
Well, it's contributed, so it's being put in the system. We can have phrases outside the system as another entity, but here contributed phrase and then contributed proto-claim, it's a contributed frame that's being offered as possibly a claim. And then if it actually has all these further things, then we'll call it an immutable claim. And by the way, both of these should be immutable, right? Contributed immutable phrase, contributed immutable proto-claim, and contributed immutable. And
sounds to me you're just renaming things, to be honest.
Yeah, I am. But basically, what Tim and I are saying is the immutable claim definition, which we were aligned on. I'm going to remove my alignment right now.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're renaming this, but at the same time not, because what in your rename do you call after?
I am. That's true, because I'm trying to avoid the removing my check mark on this, but I realize it's ridiculous. I don't want to lose the work that's been done on this because it's useful work. I just want to call it something else. And I want the immutable claim card to be a much lower standard, which is pretty much what I was calling immutable proto-claim.
Unfortunately, I've hit my hard.
But I'll certainly...
yeah, it's a proto-claim, but so in other words, you want to remove which people can agree or disagree with as a whole, because a proto-claim people might not disagree or disagree with. So essentially, you're defining this thing, which intends to be an immutable claim. So you're just renaming things, to be honest. What would you call so you want to rename this one to a proto-claim? What?
No, I would say this is, I would call this, frankly, I don't see that much difference between the acceptability criterion of this one and the acceptability criterion of
I
acceptable.
think these two can be merged.
Yes, so I'm saying I would call that acceptable immutable claim. I would merge all of what we have as immutable claim. I would merge into acceptable immutable claim. It's one that has
I mean,
enough.
it is simply an extension, so these can be easily merged. Okay, but you said you wanted to rename it as a proto claim. Is this a proto claim or not?
One second. What I mean by proto claim, and let me get that, is somebody entered a phrase, a contributed immutable phrase, and said, this is a claim. Now, we don't even know if it's a claim because we don't even know if it's something that can be agreeable or it can be agreed or disagreed with. So it may not even be a claim, but we know it's somebody that at least one person claims is a claim. And that's what I want to call a proto claim.
Yeah, so how is that different from contributed claim exactly?
The claim added, well, because we don't know that it's a claim yet.
Yeah, but rename it as a proto claim or whatever you wanted to call it.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the definition. I'm looking at the definition. I'm looking at the definition. The definition says a claim added to. Which
intends to be. Somebody added it and intended it to be a.
So what about a phrase added to a claim repository which intends to be an acceptable instead of a claim? We don't know it's a claim yet.
Yeah, but
or content, even more general.
Yeah, exactly. Because
content.
I mean,
yes, that's already much better. As long as the claim hasn't been accepted.
Did it save?
And what's the difference? I hear from what you guys are saying that immutable claim, contributed claim, and acceptable claim should be maybe merged.
No, I think contributed claim is very relevant.
Because isn't immutable claim not contributed? Or is it?
Immutable claim has more to do with the shared immutable representation. That's the key point here.
Okay, that means that a contributed claim is also an immutable claim.
It
always
aims to be, but it may not.
It aims to be an acceptable immutable claim and therefore an immutable claim. Yeah. Okay.
I would say contributed proto claim because we don't know it's a claim yet.
I mean, yeah, that just makes the name longer.
Yes.
What's in the name? I don't care.
Okay.
It's probably one word, isn't it?
I would have put a hyphen, but that's me.
But it's essentially the same. Nothing changes. We're just
well, we said it may not even be a claim. We don't know yet that it's a claim.
Yeah, but that's inherent in the definition. It's the same. We're just renaming it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's inherent in the definition since we said content added to. See, if we just say contributed claim, it assumes it's a claim. We don't know that yet. Okay, as long as the claim hasn't been accepted, can be edited, removed. This is something that for me is not part of the definition. It may be a property of the system, but it's not part of the definition.
And this isn't either. Yeah, wait.
So there's no shared immutable representation yet, or is there for the contributed?
That's a good question.
That's for me an empirical decision. Do we have use cases for having an immutable representation at this level? I would say yes. And that's the use case that Tim introduced, where people would say, hey, you removed my beautiful claim. It's not even a claim.
Yeah, but the language
still allowed
to express that, right?
Added, yeah.
It wasn't impossible to, I mean, the only thing here is like, yeah, you would need some extra nouns for the history of that, basically. But I mean, this language doesn't preclude that at all. But I mean, if you want to remove the whole mutability, we can remove it.
Yeah, I did not say anything about that. But the question was, should it be immutable? Or should it be referenceable? Let's use. Should it be referenceable at this stage before it's acceptable, or anything? And that's for me, that translates to how much do we want to fulfill that use case. But I think that use case does requires that. The use case that we just pointed to requires the contributed proto claims to be immutable.
So is it still useful to separate the what was it, immutable claim and acceptable claim?
Yes, because I mean, they just build on top of one another. For simplicity, it would be easy to call just the aggregation of them the immutable claim. But I mean,
yeah, and I was like, not, yeah, for me, immutable claim is weakly acceptable immutable claim, and acceptable is strongly acceptable immutable claim.
But that's not the key of the thing here. It's you need to reference. So it seems like, I think for completeness, I would still call this a proto-immutable claim, because an immutable claim is going to be something different than a canonical claim, and a contributed proto-canonical claim is going to be something different than a contributed proto-immutable claim.
Okay, so but if
how about contributed content then?
No, because you can have contributed content that does not claim to be a claim. It may claim to be an entity.
It's important what you're trying to contribute. And the key thing that this thing is trying to introduce is indeed to do with referenceability.
Yeah, if you want to put immutable, I have no problem. But for me, I'd like to keep those things separate, so we can speak about immutable, mutable, contributed, accepted.
They aren't, because the referenceability is exactly that. Then we can go to the discussion, which I was trying to say before. The structures we're gonna talk about in the later user stories of definitions and arguments, are these always operating on immutable claims, or are they operating on canonical claims? And I'm gonna strongly argue I don't want them to operate on canonical claims. That's not gonna work.
I agree totally. but okay, the problem
and that
is
distinction needs to be made, right?
Yes, I agree.
So you cannot detach the
no,
immutable
and this is where I disagree.
Okay.
that for me, that's a non sequitur. See, if we have on the one hand, the contributed, accepted, acceptable axis, right? That's one axis of adjectives. And we have another axis of adjectives, which is mutable, immutable, and not in this sense of immutable claim, but in the more conventional sense of immutable claim, which it does not entail accessibility criteria. Then we have the referenceable and usable. These are all adjectives. And
they are, but they take on a slightly different meaning depending on the noun. The criteria change depending on which noun you apply them to.
What I'm saying is these are facets. And then you can say, when we're dealing with a certain level, what you want to call immutable claim, what we really mean is accepted or acceptable, because I'm not sure, but both are possible, immutable, referenceable, maybe usable, I'm not sure, claims. And whereas canonical claims are something entirely, because they're, well, they're not based on claims, they're actually claim equivalence classes with a preferred version. So they're a construct based on immutable claims, and maybe we need to name that. Claim family and family representative, I don't know, or claim, and claim ident. I call them topics, yes. The thing that
I mean, we can do both. We can introduce immutable, and if immutable always is a shared immutable representation that can be linked to or whatever, we can add a concept for that. But I mean,
yeah,
it's simply decomposing what we already have, right?
Yes, yes, yes. But I think that a lot of conversations are difficult because in the glossary, things are pre-composed. And for me, the composition is part of the decisions. And so a lot of us are resisting certain composites because we feel, oh, this particular composite assumes certain decisions. And we want to discuss the decisions. And we can't do that because we don't have the components, the facets well defined.
Yeah, but still the key facet that's not well defined here is the referenceability.
What I'm saying is let's define the facets, and then it will be easier to discuss which combinations of facets are useful.
As long as they're not context specific, that works yet.
Yeah.
But so to give one example that I can already see a problem, immutability, like, okay, let's try to define immutability like free of noun, just as an adjective, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, how would you define that?
Okay. I realized that, okay, basically it's a data structure whose reference, and here we have to be careful because it may not be the same reference as in referenceability where we mean external referenceability, but here we might only mean internal referenceability. But okay, so, but we may mean external, so I'm not sure about that. But certainly a data structure with which can be retrieved using a reference that is guaranteed to always retrieve the same data structure. Oh, yeah, that's not a good formulation.
Data and without structure, right?
Exactly.
No, that's the second. I'd remove the second structure.
I would also remove the first one. Why the structure matter? Data which can
yeah,
be
okay. Data which can be retrieved using a reference is guaranteed to always retrieve the same data. Okay, remove the second structure. I agree. Yeah, that's pretty much.
So since it's an adjective, is
maybe it's about the reference.
Something which can be retrieved using a reference that is going to always retrieve.
Or maybe just a reference that is guaranteed to always retrieve the same data.
It's not a reference. It's the adjective is immutable. So,
well, I think removing data is, when we speak of immutable, we do mean immutable data, not immutable objects, like concrete objects.
But that's exactly where the distinction lies. It's not.
Am I bundling too much? Maybe.
Because remember why we added immutable, why this wasn't even called immutable claim before we renamed it, right?
Yeah.
The whole point was a shared immutable representation. It wasn't about the data, it was about the representation.
Yeah, and I'd be happy. And I'd be happy to say that it always retrieves the same representation of the thing.
That's the key thing here. So, but is that then the adjective?
In the adjective, I think it's true. The same representation of that thing. Yeah.
So something which can be retrieved using a reference that is guaranteed, which is guaranteed to always retrieve the same
representation of that thing.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, for me too.
We still need to add. Yeah, we'll leave it for there.
Later, yeah.
Let's move this in alignment because we're doing it.
No, it's in proposed. It's only in alignment once. It's actually even only once all the examples are added.
I'm fine with proposed.
I forgot the process. but I think it should even, yeah, no, it needs to be complete. But yeah, I'll add it here. Oh, we can quickly add examples, but
examples, basically data.
A data structure,
Yeah,
which can be retrieved by its identity from a database.
from a process.
Process.
I would say I would remove the from. It can be retrieved. We don't say how. Sorry,
Yeah, I mean,
something.
it's an example.
Yeah, that is an example.
Oh, it's an example. You're right. You're right. You're right. Then add the database and the example, because then I will add anything in IPFS as another example.
Again?
Yeah, anything on IPFS. I think that's good enough.
Articles on archival.
Maybe the DOI.
Yeah. Well,
Sometimes a DOI can, there can still be revisions. It can have a DOI before it's final.
yeah, but you can also refer to a specific version, right? Within a DOI, no?
I don't know. A DOI works like a URL. You ask something and you retrieve something, and it may vary. You are not guaranteed to get the same PDF.
So a DOI wouldn't be then.
Not really. It's after publication.
At the edge case.
Actually, yeah. Well, it's after publication. It's true. It's guaranteed, but before publication, it's not. Published research articles.
All right, let's. What do you call a preprint?
Yeah.
Actually, let's add it to does not match definition, because I think we agree on that.
Yep.
And then let's add one more here, and then we're done.
Basically anything with a web page.
Okay.
Felix?
Yeah, please check me. Sorry.
I mean, yeah, we can try to do that. I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna resolve the issue. I think the key thing, well, it's gonna resolve this issue is if we start talking about referenceable, which
Let's
is
do
the
it.
key, which is a key thing.
Let's add referenceable.
And because this thing should actually be renamed to referenceable, I think, because it implies that. It implied that once it's accepted, it becomes referenceable. That's the thing I was trying to do here.
And this is part of the disagreement that is difficult to discuss unless we unbundle things. I think things should be referenceable before they're accepted.
And I agree. I mean, that was the main point of Tim, right?
Yeah. Okay. So we should try to define referenceable exactly, because that we have two different definitions of referenceable here.
We have many, yes.
So what I meant is can be used in an argument structure.
That's what Tim called usable.
No, exactly. So which one are we defining? Usable or can be? Because isn't referenceable already immutable?
I would
Don't
say
they overlap?
Yes and no. That's when I was fumbling at the beginning between internal and external references. You can have something immutable within the system because it's referenceable within the system, but the reference may not be exposed outside the system. Whereas referenceable, I think we mean referenceable from outside. Which
it's
for
not
me,
contained, right? So this is a very broad definition, so it would encompass that. No, we can add it here, right?
Maybe not in the examples, but in the definition.
But what do you want to distinguish? Because for me, both are in that definition immutable.
That's correct. But what I'm saying is that referenceable is something that can be retrieved from outside the system. And that means some immutable, like there's a full Venn diagram with 2x2 matrix of between immutable and referenceable. You can have mutable referenceable, mutable non-referenceable, immutable referenceable, immutable non-referenceable.
So something which can be retrieved
from outside the system.
Yeah, and it's orthogonal to immutable, mutable, right?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Because
By
it could mean like
reference?
it could mean like the latest version of something, or like
what do you
a
reference?
specific version.
That's a good point. Something we're using
An identifier. Well,
yeah, using an identifier. I think that's good enough. Well, actually, it's more than an identifier. It's a identifier or locator. I'd say it's a locator. URI locator is a URL.
And I would put into the examples, I would put like a mutable and an immutable example.
Yeah.
sorry. Oh yeah. Well, that's a web page, so
That's it.
We learned. Yeah.
Good.
does not match definition.
An internal data structure which is not exposed.
Paragraph on a web page.
Actually, that's not true.
Is a paragraph itself the locator? Not really, because what if there's two paragraphs on that page? Which one do you mean?
It's no, but you can use fragment identifiers, or you can use XPath or XPointer.
Then, oh, okay, so this gets interesting. Is the reference, can the locator return not found? Is it still referenceable if it can return not found?
I would say not. That's a very interesting edge case. I would say not.
It's not the edge case, it's the argument why I was saying, well, a paragraph is not referenceable. Because
no,
if the web page updates and it's removed, it's no longer.
Yes, correct. Oh, that way. Yes, it can. Okay, in that sense, it can. Well, then the paragraph has stopped being referenceable. But I would argue it was referenceable before, and then it stopped being referenceable.
Okay,
referenceable
true.
is a transient property.
But so you agree we want to add that in the definition?
Yes.
Okay, something which can be retrieved from outside the system using a locator. In case it is not retrievable, it is not referenceable.
It can, in case it stops being accessible, it can stop being referenceable.
Yeah, but I mean, why use different language? We said can be retrieved, so.
Yeah, which can be retrieved now from an outside system at a given point in time. But now is good enough.
This then?
Yep, good. I'm happy.
I think so. Yes.
So let's try to find some examples that convey that.
For me, it's an internal data structure that is not exposed.
Piece of paper.
Outside of a system is not referenceable outside of that system, right? Because I mean, context matters here.
Yep.
And then piece of paper on the desk, why not?
Sure.
But let's try to find something more realistic. The one we just said, like a paragraph on a web page that.
Or like a past version of something that doesn't keep history.
paragraph on the past version of a web page.
Oh, no, yeah, no. Past version of a web page. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aligned.
I mean, archive.org, but yeah.
What?
I mean, archive.org.
Yeah, but then the web page is a different web page, right?
Yes.
So it depends what you're referencing.
Which was not archived, so it should be added. You're right.
Sorry?
Which was not archived.
Yeah.
But actually, this is interesting because it is an interesting edge case. If it's archived, it means it's referenceable by another URL, the one on archive.org.
Yeah, exactly. The locator is different.
The locator is different.
So it's actually not the same thing, I guess.
Interesting. So is referenceable? It's referenceable in the abstract, but it's not referenceable by a specific locator or by a known locator. But it's there. It's this, the reference is discoverable. I mean, archive.org has a known API. So
I mean, if the mechanism that resolves it also looks at archive, then it's perfectly fine.
Let's put that
if
in
the
edge
browser
cases.
checks archive.
Let's put that in edge cases because I'm a bit.
Yeah, how do you want to write that?
An offline web page that was archived.
Yeah, that's good. Is reference
old URL.
Does not point to the web page anymore.
The old web page is no longer referenceable, but
no, it's still, well, it's abstractly referenceable, but it's no longer referenceable by the original URL. Yeah, that's good. Edge cases.
So yeah, that's not the one that I want to talk about, which is the main thing where we really need to move to at some point. And what my whole accepted was about is then usable or accepted.
No,
and you guys kept going to referenceable, whereas that's not what I was trying to say.
It's embeddable. No, not embeddable. I'm beginning to like usable, but it's ridiculous. It's complex. It's too much.
I called it accepted because for me, the key reason to have these acceptability criteria is exactly so. If you use it in structures, it's correct. Like the content has these requirements because you hope to use it, right? That's where these requirements come from.
And the reason we keep disagreeing is that we want to use it in structures before it's accepted. To be filtered out in many views, but we want to be able to say, this is not accepted yet, but I think this is a counter argument.
But that's referenceability. That's not the other thing. Yeah, it is. You just want to point to an old version of an immutable whatever of a contributed claim.
One second. Disagree. I can reference it. That is, I can have a URL that points to it. And there's a second concern, which I can use that URL in an argument structure.
Exactly.
And for me, that's the second, validly or invalidly, properly or improperly. I can use it. I can create an argument structure that uses that reference. And that's the concept I'm talking about.
Yeah, me too.
Different than saying I can do so properly, which is what you're talking about.
Okay. But so it is structural referenceability in argument structure.
Yes.
Okay, let's try to find a meaningful name for that.
Yes. Okay, now we're talking about the same thing.
No, I think we are, except that indeed I coincide that with acceptable, because the main reason for, but if you want to tease them apart, sure. But I mean, the main reason why these acceptability criteria exist, my argument is because otherwise you cannot meaningfully use them in the words we're looking for right now. Okay.
I agree totally and
let's keep them
meaningfully.
separate then.
Structural
Linkable?
referenceability was good.
Linkable?
Yeah, maybe.
Argument linkable?
Structure linkable.
Composable?
I like structurally referenceable. No, that because composition is another bailiwick. We have all this notion of composite claims and structurally linkable. Okay, I'm liking that.
I'm liking that as well. And then, yeah, the definition will explain it. By the way, how are we on referenceable? Because I'm the only one that checked off my name here.
Yeah, please check. I'm not on the page.
And I presume you too, Marc-Antoine?
Yes.
I think this is the last one before I'm gonna watch Dune in a bit. Looking forward to that movie.
Yay! I'm such a fan of.
Did you read the books?
No, yes, I did. Well, not all of them. The first three, the first four.
That one by Frank, by the original author. I think the other ones are by the son or something.
No, there's the fifth that's still by Frank Herbert, and I decided not to go to. But I went to the fourth and gave up. It's not the God Emperor. The God Emperor is the third. No, it is God Emperor is the fourth. Yeah. I was going to say I'm a fan of the producer. I'm a fan of the producer.
Oh, okay.
I find him amazing. Dune has good things in that. I loved the TV adaptation series of Dune. I think it was very well done.
Wasn't that the series that failed and had super low ratings?
It failed, but I think it was very well done. It was very faithful to the book. Much more than any of the movies, of course. I'm curious to see the latest movie. Very curious. Okay, structurally linkable. A referenceable data structure that can be used.
Oh, and this is.
Isn't that just internally referenceable? Or
good question. Let me think.
Well, it wasn't referenceable part of outside, and I mean.
I think. But the point Felix is saying is that we could, in theory, have internal structural linking. So okay, fair enough. You're right. Let's remove the referenceable constraint because it is orthogonal. A data structure which can be, you do need a word for internal references.
I think, to be honest, this referenceability shouldn't say whether it's internal or external. I didn't really get, because if you look at the language we used,
okay, so
it's not referenceable outside of that system. So it's weird because in a way it is using the term referenceable.
Yeah, so let's change the name. So let's call it.
No, or like make it cover both.
Yeah, but it does in a way, because if you see it does not match definition thing. It says an internal data structure that is not exposed outside of a system is not referenceable outside of that system.
So
I mean, like we have outside the system in the definition. So we could just
exactly. I would
actually just do this.
No, stop. What I'm proposing is let's keep that work, but let's change the name and call that outwardly referenceable or externally referenceable. And we may have a referenceable that doesn't have those, which is just referenceable.
We're decomposing a lot.
But it implies referenceable, right?
Yeah, it implies referenceable.
And okay, yeah.
I mean, is the whole decomposition we're doing worth it?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, we can find agreement on it, so that's good. Let's see what Timothy. But I think that this is the key one that I wanted to go to, which is basically This is where the disagreement is going to lie. I think.
So, no, I don't think so. a data structure that can be referenced in higher level structures, basically.
But isn't it linking for the purpose of composition and evolution, and why I mean, this goes down to basic data structure, and
yeah,
I would even say it's not a data structure, it's
part of a
content,
bigger
because
data
didn't we
structure. Maybe it's
call,
part of a bigger data structure.
yeah, why say data structure? It is something.
Part of a bigger thing.
I think structurally linkable makes no sense outside of data structures.
Something which.
Okay, question. What is a non-data structure structurally linkable thing? Do you have examples? Could be, but I don't see them.
I mean, like
Yeah.
pieces of like settle custom.
Yeah, I mean, like pins on a pin board where you structurally link images together to solve a crime. Why isn't it
Okay.
structurally linkable?
Okay.
I mean,
you
why?
That example, I accept the example.
Yeah.
Good.
But as I understand it, is the whole linking of these claims is there to create a bigger structure in itself, like an argument tree or something, right? I think that's
yeah.
what we capture here.
I'm asking myself, gears of a watch. Would you say they're structurally linked to create the watch? I'm not convinced.
They're not referencing each other.
Yeah. Well, okay, fair enough. Interesting. Okay. 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 So we can put that in the counterexamples.
Yeah, but let's first try to define it.
Yeah, something which can be referenced.
Yeah, and then I think we
in
can
a meaningful whole.
And externally, I think we're talking about externally referenceable here.
No, not necessarily.
No? Okay.
No,
Not necessarily. Yeah,
that's orthogonal.
It could be inside a single computer system.
Isn't it the sum is greater than
the Gestalt, the sum is greater than the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, so something which can be referenced to other things
to create
the whole, which is greater than the sum of the parts.
Is greater than the sum of is this too far-fetched and philosophical?
Maybe, but has a meaning beyond the sum of the parts. Maybe the problem is I'm using meaning, which is
it's fine. Something which can reference other things so that the whole carries additional meaning, which is saying the same but less.
Let's talk about examples maybe first, and then we.
An argument. If
we can derive a better definition.
Claim
referenced in an argument
be linked as a supporting claim to another claim.
Yeah. In an argument, I would say
the definition can be included as part of a claim.
In the point, you already have like a claim can be linked as a supporting claim to another claim. This example does not contain the whole that carries additional meaning. I think that should be included in the examples. What is the whole? Like in the first example, it's the argument tree or argument map, right?
In an argument, I would add in an argument.
Or to represent an argument. Yeah, well, that's different ways of going about it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Because like the claim itself is not an argument, but like the interlinking, then it becomes an argument.
I think Steven is trying to avoid forcing us to reify arguments, which is fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it simple primarily, but definition can include as part of a claim in order to disambiguate it from other claims. Evidence on a corkboard between which strings of right can be bound. What's the verb here? Is it bound?
Connected.
Strong?
Yes, strong is good. Evidence as pins, as pinned cards,
Okay, does not match definition.
Gears of a watch, I think is an edge case.
Which one?
The gears of a watch. It's not, there's no reference. Gears of a watch.
I don't get it. Like the
cogs inside the gears, yeah.
All the parts
They're connecting.
Old-fashioned mechanical watch. It's
but
made
they
of,
are, because I mean, it is the combination of the
yes, I know,
big and the
creating
small
meaning.
one, which carries meaning.
I said it's an edge case.
Mm.
But it can be argued that it does not match because these are not references. Or
Okay.
maybe common function is not the same as common meaning.
How about websites linking to each other?
But we haven't defined reference, so it's a bit.
We haven't defined meaning either.
Yeah, so I mean, it's, and that, I think this one is much tougher than the other two. We did.
It is.
How about websites linking to each other, which have no?
No, that's a good counterexample.
Like what is it? Does it match the definition because it creates the internet, or it doesn't?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Don't add it as an edge case, please. Don't just delete it.
Which one? The gears of a watch?
Yeah.
No, to websites linking to each other.
Yeah, that one. Well, it depends. I would say in general they do add meaning, because the
meaning is not. Is it a is it a semantic web link, or is it just a plain link? Because I would argue in the letter, yes, in the former, no, because that's what the whole semantic web is about.
I would say, good question. I would say, not, for example, if I have a traditional link to Wikipedia on a web page, I'm using the Wikipedia link to define and disambiguate and refer to things that I'm not referring to. So I'm making my referencing web page greater than if it did not contain the link. So for me, it does actually match the definition. And certainly, the Wikipedia page is structurally linkable. As such, it can be used to enrich the meaning of my web page. I think this actually matches.
Yeah, but structurally, I think the structure, it's linkable, but is it structurally linkable? Because I think the key thing here is really the structural part, which implies some certain expectations of structure.
Good point.
Maybe because the two websites share the same kind of website data structure, right? They both use HTML.
Yes, but then.
Okay.
Another example that comes to mind before I forget, a wiki.
I don't know what.
just.
I don't know where to place these, so it shows that the definition is not really working at the moment.
It shows
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree. Okay, what was I trying to get at? And you're right.
For me, the key point is really the structure is there to provide additional functionality, right? You want to add a supporting argument, and you want to assume that what you are linking is an argument, because if you just link spam, it's not an argument. So
no, I agree totally with, I understand your aim. What I'm saying is I don't want to preclude someone from saying, I think this is an argument, I think it's a pro, I think it goes there. And then somebody else checking afterwards to say, okay, this one is valid, no, this one is spam.
Yeah. But I mean, in that case, they are structurally linkable, and then we can use structurally linkable to say, should all contributed claims be structurally linkable? I would say no, because then, yeah, you have weird,
because then you have
weird entire data structures that
which you don't want in
created,
your system, and I want in my system, and
yes.
then we, exactly.
Okay.
Which is perfectly valid conversation to have, but we need to be able to have it. But is that an adjective? That's really a question. The question is, do we want to use, what we're asking really is, do we want to use proto claims? And that's on the other axis, right? It's the proto acceptable accepted. Do we want to use proto claims in higher level constructs? And maybe it's not an adjective, maybe it's not, but it's certainly a question, and I need vocabulary to ask that question. So let's just work with referenceable and externally referenceable, and say that anything referenceable is this.
But yeah, we need it because what the definition that I added was accepted immutable claim, which for me is structurally linkable, and I wanted a contributed proto claim not to be structurally linkable. So that's what we're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. It is. And I want something else, but at least we know what we're talking about.
Yeah. So that means we must find examples here, right? The claim can be linked to, yeah. So the matching ones are easy. So why is Gears of a Watch such a weird case? Because we are trying to be too broad with something which can be
I'm beginning to think that there won't be case of something that is referenceable and not structurally linkable. Because what structurally linkable means is saying this system accepts using this reference in this context or not. It's not a property of the thing, it's a property of the system, whether it accepts any referenceable data structure.
Very good point. And reference in itself carry this whole value add thing, right?
Yeah. I'm beginning to feel I have a hard stop, folks.
Yeah, I'll also have to head out soon.
Yeah.
Let's just leave this one in here in undefined, and then let's work on that next.
Yeah, we're not converging on this, but we're converging on what we want to talk about, which I think was worth the price of admission for me of writing these.
Yeah, I'll actually add accepted here as well, because that's a different one, right?
Yes, I agree.
Where is it? Oh, here.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a good one.
See you next time.
Thanks.
See you.
See you next time.